To talk about Max Bergmann of the Flynn. We saw the sentencing document. What are you expecting from today's?
What Mueller will actually the Mueller investigation about where it's at, about how much cooperation Michael Flynn was giving, but we didn't actually learn that much more than what we saw a year ago when Flynn was indicted. About what we learn, sort of a lot more. I think the thing that we'll learn with Manafort is a lot more about the lied to them. So what the Mueller prosecutors say is that they entered into this agreement with Manafort. Manafort was going to become cooperating witness, and when you become cooperating, you can't ended cooperation. And what Mueller is contesting is Manafort indeed did lie to them. He tried not to tell them why he lied. And my guess is why he lied. Very explosive in the sense that it reveals that Manafort was passing information on to the Trump legal team. It could be reveal kind of this larger cover-up. And then the most explosive thing it could potentially reveal is the nature of what Manafort was lying about. And if he was lying about potential collusion during the election, I think that is what people are kind of wondering, speculating. Is this going to be kind of the moment where Mueller reveals some of what he knows about the collusion during the campaign? And as for Cohen, that's also a bit unclear. There was the plea agreement that came out last week, and so this is now the sentencing memo. Now, is Mueller going to reveal a lot more information in the sentencing memo than what was revealed last week? Perhaps, potentially. Is a lot of stuff going to be redacted? I think perhaps, potentially. So we're in this kind of, we know there's going to be a lot of activity today, but we don't quite know yet the full nature of the bombshells that are going to be exploded.
You published at the MoscowProject.org just the other day, after the Flynn sentencing memo, that there may have been things we missed in that sentencing. Why don't you break that down for us, if you would, please?
So I think the main thing that we missed is, and most of this was sort of in the original indictment that occurred of Mike Flynn in December of last year, but it was really sort of spelled out by Mueller in a very clear way. And what we missed was a potential quid pro quo between the Trump team and the Russians. And what was spelled out here was that when Michael Flynn, so what happened in late December is the Obama administration sanctioned Russia. They evicted 35 Russian officials here in the United States. We seized 2 Russian facilities, Russian dachas here in the United States. I was in the State Department. We were expecting a really strong Russian response because it's Vladimir Putin. He always responds. And then what we heard was nothing. And we later found out that Michael Flynn had 5 phone calls with Ambassador Sergei Kislyak, the Russian ambassador. And in those 5 phone calls that Michael Flynn, we know because of Mueller, has told us, was coordinating his comments, what he was telling Kislyak with Jared Kushner in the transition team. And they talked about sanctions. They sort of talked about a quid pro quo. And that became clear in the Mueller sentencing memo, that they had this back and forth, and that the nature of what they were discussing wasn't just sort of, hey, don't sanction us, don't retaliate against us because we'll look at sanctions, but they also mentioned issues relating to collusion during the campaign, materially relevant information. Now, that may seem pretty complicated, but when we think about Mike Flynn was the incoming national security advisor. He was in position. That's one of the most powerful positions in the United States government. He was therefore going to be in a position to deliver things to sort of pay Russia back. And we know that one of the first things that he was trying to do was get rid of Russia sanctions when he became national security advisor. So what Mueller pointed to was a clear quid pro quo, I think, during the transition that tied back to Russian activities during the election, Russian help for the Trump campaign. And that was sort of vaguely worded, but that's sort of the clear implication of what Mueller was writing about.
So in this, too, Pence becomes even more implicated, doesn't he?
Yes. And this is where I think a lot of attention should be paid to Mike Pence. Now, there's
Please.
no indication that Mike Pence has done anything to sort of break the law. But what's clear is that they created a cover story for the firing of Flynn that simply doesn't hold up. And this is a story that Pence has propagated. In the Bob Woodward book that came out last summer, or came out in September, it's reported that Mike Pence, Reince Priebus, and Don McGahn, the White House counsel, gathered together in the White House Situation Room in early February 2017 to read the transcripts of the Flynn calls with Ambassador Kislyak and to say, okay, let's get to the bottom of this. And what they say is that they read the transcripts and said, okay, Flynn did lie to us. Ergo, he must be fired. Hence, Flynn lied to Pence about sanctions. That's why he was fired. That doesn't make any sense for a couple of reasons. One, we know Flynn was coordinating what he was saying with Jared Kushner and people at Mar-a-Lago, the transition team. So if Flynn lied, lots of people lied to Mike Pence. The second reason it doesn't make sense and potentially implicates Pence is I think we can now circle February 2017 as at least as a date that Mike Pence and Reince Priebus would have learned that there was collusion taking place during the election, because Mueller, in his filing on Tuesday, told us that there was materially relevant information in the phone calls between Michael Flynn and Ambassador Kislyak about collusion. So when Pence and Priebus are reading these transcripts, what are they also? They're learning that Flynn lied to them about sanctions, but they're also learning about collusion. And yet the only thing they tell the American public is that, well, we had to fire him because he lied to us about sanctions. That now looks like a total cover story, an effort to kind of cover up Flynn's involvement in conspiring with the Russians. And I think a lot of questions need to be asked about Mike Pence, about this cover story, and about what else did he learn when he read those transcripts back in February 2017. Now, this may not be a criminally involve criminal wrongdoing, but he certainly looks like he may have lied to the American public.
Is it Max Bergman with us, folks, 11 minutes before the hour, 866-99 series. Is it conceivable, though, any level of criminal wrongdoing, because you go into another area, and others have talked about this as well, whereby you had this transition team, and Christie was up for it. He was opposed to Flynn. Pence wasn't. So Pence has his way, not only gets the transition team, but brings Flynn in. What if Pence knew what he was doing all along by bringing Flynn in because of what was prearranged, because of the whole quid pro quo? Couldn't that expose Pence criminally?
Yeah, I think, the big question now is, what did Pence know and when did he know it?
Right.
Remember, he was also on the campaign. He was campaigning. He was there, involved in a lot of discussions and a lot of what happened. And the same is true with Reince Priebus. When Trump became president, what happens is the RNC campaign apparatus joins forces with the presidential campaign in most cases. That happens on the Democratic side. It happened with Trump and the RNC. They were working hand in glove together. So I think there is a big question of what did all these people know and when did they know it? And so, during the transition, you hit it, you're exactly right, that Chris Christie was like, Michael Flynn is not going to be a part of this. No way. And Mike
and how would Christie even know to say that too? Christie must have known something or heard something that said, no, we can't have this dude around, right?
I mean, I think it's very telling that President Obama, sort of went out of character in some ways in his conversation with Donald Trump after Donald Trump won the election, and they were meeting in the Oval Office. And it's one of the two things that Obama tells Trump. He says, don't bring on Michael Flynn.
Right.
Now, to me, we have to think about the whole story arc of Michael Flynn. Now, he's sort of been treated with praise because he's such a cooperating witness, and he has given sort of everything he knows to Mueller. But when I look at John Brennan's comments to the House Intelligence Committee back in the spring of 2017, where he talks about people heading down the treasonous path, that, before they even know it, they sort of become compromised and they become suborned. I can't help but sort of injecting Michael Flynn into that conversation. Michael Flynn had all these had gone to the GRU, the Russian intelligence agency, at when he was the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency here in the U.S. when he was in the Obama administration. He's then fired by President Obama. We know he's really embittered after that. Then he starts to be involved with all these sketchy companies and consulting groups and Turkey lobbying and gets money from RT. Then he appears at the dinner table with Vladimir Putin and at the RT Gala in December 2015. Before he's on the campaign, he sort of looks like a trophy to Vladimir Putin. Now, Michael Flynn knows a lot of America's closely guarded intelligence secrets. And if he is getting chummy with foreign actors, I think that would be something that would really go on the radar of U.S. intelligence, of the FBI and others. And this is just a speculation, is that they saw something and notified Obama that this guy was seriously compromised and was potentially a foreign agent. And indeed, he was a foreign agent of Turkey, an unregistered one. And so hence, I think Obama didn't just pull that out of thin air in warning Trump about Mike Flynn. So I think there's clearly something there. I think people were following his kind of, in the intelligence community, following the kind of a downward trajectory of Michael Flynn and in his sort of descent down a really dark path.
Trump was already up this morning tweeting furiously at the special counsel and everybody concerned. What's your take on that? Is he scared? Is he nervous? I think he is, probably.
Yeah. So how I started off our conversation being, sort of tamping down expectations, being like, we don't really know what's going to be in there.
Right.
There could be a lot of redacted materials. Well, last time it looks like Trump was probably informed by Matthew Whitaker of what was going to come. And it led to this whole Twitter tirade. And the Twitter tirade this morning is rather spectacular.
Yeah.
And it looks like someone who is really, really, really freaked out and, not sort of taking it with a stiff upper lip, but
Right.
is frantic. And so that is more than suggestive that we're going to see some bombshells today, and that today is going to be a really, really bad day for Donald Trump. I think one sort of just broader point to make since the last time we spoke, which a couple of weeks ago, is a lot has changed. I think, when we were talking a couple of weeks ago, the window of sort of potential outcomes in the Mueller investigation was very wide and very wide open. What I mean by that is, you could sort of plausibly say, well, Mueller may not find anything related to, conspiring with the Russians. This may all be about obstruction of justice or, Trump perjuring himself or other things that are kind of down the totem pole of kind of the outrage meter. And I think where we are now is the window of potential outcomes has really narrowed. We now know that Mueller is likely zeroing in on collusion. We know this because of this draft plea agreement that was sent to Jerome Corsi, in which Jerome Corsi rejected and then gave to NBC and other news outlets to then post. And what that agreement and document says is that Corsi was part of the conspiracy with Russia. He was part of the collusion.
Right.
It says that Corsi was trying to get information with WikiLeaks at the direction of Roger Stone, who he knew was in contact with Trump. And that zeroes in on the collusion. And Michael Cohen and Paul Manafort are now sort of really expanding the cover-up here. Trump is acting incredibly guilty. You don't freak out like he's doing on Twitter, and then conduct this vast effort to sort of obstruct justice and engage in this cover-up. If you don't have a lot to hide, he's acting guilty. So I think the potential outcomes here are really narrowed to the point where this clearly looks like this clearly indicates it's going after Trump and it's going to finger the president.
Yeah. This is a big deal. Well, we'll see what comes of today, and I think we'll learn a lot. I think we got a lot from Flynn, even though it was the Flynn sentencing document, even though a lot was redacted. I suspect we'll get a lot today, and you will be there to help us discern what are some of the things that are there that we need to give particular attention to, and what's in the details or beneath the details that we may not see. So that's what the Moscow Project is for, folks, and that's why we have them on. Go to the MoscowProject.org. Follow them on Twitter at Moscow_project. Max Bergmann with 2 N's, also on Twitter. Max, keep up the great work, man. Thank you for the update too. Okay.
No, thanks a lot for having me.
All right, of course, always, man, and enjoy your weekend. Okay.
You too.
All right, take care now, folks. If all that does it for this week, we'll do it again on Monday, as usual. If all minds are clear, it has been made